Britt Hume is Fox's senior political analyst, and by senior we mean senior and wisest, and he joins us tonight.
No, you mean age?
No, I don't actually. I mean, when there's something genuinely perplexing, you were the first person I think of to explain it.
That's a little frightening, but thank you.
You know, but so to you the question is, how much change will this mean for us in the United States? Does this have effects that most Americans will feel?
Well, we don't know, because we don't know how effective we'll be able to be in reimposing sanctions without the participation of the other countries that were in the alliance that brought this treaty together, this executive agreement together.
Right.
So it could turn out that America's able to put really punishing sanctions back in place, and that the Iranians will react to that, maybe by becoming more bellicose, maybe by becoming less. No country that's going to try to be a big player on the world stage can afford to have a collapsing economy. So that's a fact. You need to be able to finance all this stuff. And, of course, the argument that's made, of course, Tucker, is that Iran got so much up front, stuff that's already out the door that Iran is enjoying the benefits of, as your previous guest, Michael Anton, mentioned, that getting out now doesn't really hurt them that badly, because much of the benefit is already accrued. That all remains to be seen. What I think it does show, Tucker, is the fragility of big international agreements that are not treaties. Now, lots and lots of executive agreements are made by presidents with other countries, usually not on something this major. And, of course, that meant that all it was an agreement between the previous president and the Iranians and the other partners in the deal, which means that this president had the option that he is today exercised, which is to renounce the deal and reimpose the sanctions.
The Obama people must be fear. I mean, they really spent a lot of time, effort, and I would say brushed aside critical American interest in order to get this deal.
Well, remember, this was the reason, of course, why it isn't a treaty. Is that the administration knew there was no chance in the world that it could pass the Senate, which, you know, by a significant enough margin, if any margin at all, that it could be put into effect. So they did it the only way they could. And think of this, Tucker. He did a lot of things with his pen and his phone. A lot of regulations were imposed. A lot of things domestically were done, and they're all falling apart now.
Yeah.
So you know,
They were not permanent victories.
No,
so what, and we're still getting the results of the primaries tonight, but as you're watching so far what we know, is there a pattern that emerges?
Well, it looks to me like, so far at least, we're talking about Republicans who are going to oppose Democratic incumbents in several states. Right. So automatically you need a fairly formidable candidate to beat somebody who's already got the office. In Indiana, it looks like they've got a reasonably formidable candidate. Mike DeWine in Ohio, although you look at him, you think, well, who's that little guy? Well, he's actually been a very effective and successful politician for a long time in the state of Ohio, so he'll be a formidable candidate for that seat there. And of course, everybody's mesmerized by West Virginia, because you got this wacky guy, who's fresh out of a stretched crossbar hotel, who is believed to have some chance of actually winning that nomination, which of course a lot of people think would repeat the whole Roy Moore fiasco they had in Alabama, where the candidate who couldn't possibly be elected gets nominated.
Just for our viewers who may be confused by the term of art you just used, a stretch at the crossbar hotel means he just got out of prison.
Yeah, I thought that vernacular was reasonably well
so
done.
Good. Britt Hume, it's great to see you.
Thank you. Tucker.
We want to take you back 48 hours. New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman was a big deal then, a widely respected government official. He was a feminist icon. He was regarded by many as a potential Democratic presidential nominee. There's not a progressive cause that Eric Schneiderman didn't embrace wholeheartedly and then attempt to impose by force on the people of New York State. Schneiderman was an all-purpose left-wing activist. He was especially an aggressive advocate for the Me Too movement. Watch.
The challenges facing these survivors are part of a larger system of discrimination and really a manifestation of a culture of male supremacy. In recent months, we've begun a long overdue reckoning with our culture of violence and silence. We must reimagine a world where predators are exposed and held to account, and survivors are supported and empowered at every level.
It really was a culture of male supremacy, said Eric Schneiderman, and liberals nodded in their bovine way. They loved all of this passionately, without reservation. They couldn't get enough of Eric Schneiderman. Just 6 months ago, Samantha Bee, who was a TV show, compared Schneiderman to a superhero. Watch this.
It's a bird. It's a plane.
I'm Eric Schneiderman, and I'm the Attorney General of the state of New York.
Are you going to lead us out of the darkness?
The state attorneys general are going to be the first line of defense.
Eric's Justice League has challenged Trump over the first travel ban, pesticides, student loans, the second travel ban, smog, methane, Obamacare subsidies, DACA, the third travel ban, trans rights, clean power plan, and birth control access. Whew.
We're going to save ourselves together.
You're going to save us.
We're going to do it, but that requires a lot of people other than state attorneys general getting engaged.
Please be my hero.
Well, tonight, Samantha Bee's hero is disgraced and unemployed. Reporting by Ronan Farrow, released last night, suggests that in private, Schneiderman was exactly the kind of predator he claimed to be hunting. 4 different women accused Eric Schneiderman of hitting, slapping, and choking them. 2 said they later sought medical treatment for what he did. Some allege that Schneiderman made death threats against them. One says he threatened to have her followed or her phone tapped. One former girlfriend, who is Sri Lankan, told reporters that Schneiderman, quote, started calling me his brown slave and demanding that I repeat that I was his property. Schneiderman's many friends on the left didn't stick around long once the New Yorker piece came out last night. After pausing to make certain that Schneiderman's career was really dead, former allies have come out to denounce him and say how horrified and shocked they are by the allegations. They can't believe it. Please. As with Harvey Weinstein, a lot of people knew Schneiderman was not at all what he pretended to be. There are plenty of signs of that, some public, and some people said so out loud, including Donald Trump in a famous tweet 5 years ago. But the left stuck with Eric Schneiderman anyway until the last possible moment, as they always do when political majorities are at stake. They'll put up with anything for the sake of power. Principle be damned. Consider this detail from the Farrow piece. Quote, after the former girlfriend ended the relationship with Schneiderman, she told several friends about the abuse. A number of them advised her to keep the story to herself, arguing that Schneiderman was too valuable a politician for the Democrats to lose. If you can even imagine. And of course you can imagine, because once again, like the obedient little robots they are, self-described champions of women fell into line to protect an abuser of women, just as they did with Ted Kennedy and Bill Clinton and countless others. Hypocritical? Of course it is. Is it surprising? No. These are the same people who fly their private jets to global warming conferences, the ones who bring armed guards to anti-gun rallies. These are the people you see on television lecturing you about diversity from the safety of their gated neighborhoods that look like 1950s America. Are you really shocked that they covered for a violent abuser who became famous for denouncing domestic violence? Probably not. It's a familiar script. Tomorrow, bet money on it, they'll be blaming Schneiderman's abuse on high school-educated men in flyover country. It's their fault. Toxic masculinity. It's a nationwide problem. That'll happen. But before it does, let's be sure to get to the bottom of this particular story. Who knew about what Eric Schneiderman was doing, about what kind of man he was? Did New York Governor Andrew Cuomo know? How about New York Mayor Bill de Blasio? Or how about Senator and self-proclaimed Me Too leader Kirsten Gillibrand? All of them supported Schneiderman for years, just as they supported Bill Clinton and Teddy Kennedy and Harvey Weinstein. They've gotten a pass for all of that. This time it's worth getting to the bottom of their complicity in this, if any. Tammy Bruce is a radio show host in New York City. She's thought a lot about this, and she joins us now.
Hey there.
Hey, Tammy. So how long before Eric Schneiderman's alleged abuses become the abuse of all men? This is really a macro problem. Shouldn't we pause before we shift responsibility to everyone and ask who knew about this specific guy?
Yes, I mean, look, this is still, it's sinking in. It is so horrific. It's one thing to be arguing about sexual harassment and treating women badly or unequally in the workplace. That's bad enough. Yeah. These are stories of physical violence, of domestic violence, which has not been dealt with a great deal when it comes to the Me Too movement. And a man who was law enforcement, I mean, the Attorney General of the state. Right. And it's an extraordinary dynamic. And we know that these issues transcend politics and parties. But what's fascinating here is that these are men, whether it's Harvey Weinstein or Bill Clinton or the Kennedys or now this man, who wrap themselves in the cloak of the Me Too movement, of feminism, who said that they were the champions for women, and ended up being the man that they were warning everyone about. And the problem is, as you mentioned in the Ronan story, is that for women on the left, liberal women, have been told and effectively conditioned that you've got to effectively give up yourself in a way in order to be able to help the movement or help the liberal narrative. That, ironically, these women were told by their friends or even decided themselves in one case that they would put up with this because he was too important, that the argument that we want to fight to protect women that we are going to protect a man who is violent toward them. There's got to be, this is one thing to expose them, but liberal women have to ask themselves, what other lies have we been told? What other things have we been told to how to behave? What we should sacrifice ourselves for? And here's the other revelation here, Tucker. Schneiderman expected, in some ways, we believe, to be part of Hillary Clinton's administration. Weinstein, in some reports, of course, was her best friend and very close to her. The thing that has made all of this possible to come out, besides Ronan Farrow's great reporting and other individuals as well, like Jane Meyer in this report, is the fact that Hillary Clinton lost. If she had won, all of these people would have been still protected, and they would have still been victimizing women in many industries, but certainly this upper crust of the liberal framework with men, and the women that have protected them would have continued to victimize women. And now we're at a point where it's about, really, I contend, in this framework, this largeness of it, is that it's about the liberal ideology, that the right has been so demonized that you've got to protect everyone in your realm, because it's the right and conservatives who are supposed to be the deadly ones.
I think that's
it's your own victimizers there on the left.
No enemies on the left. I've seen this all my life. But
yeah.
And you're absolutely right to say that there are creepy people on both sides. That's for sure. But there's one strain of this behavior that really is particular to the left, and that's the overweening hypocrisy. We're all hypocrites, I get it. But the idea that the guy who's telling you can't have a wood stove because of its carbon emissions is flying in a private jet, or the person who says you can't have a gun has an armed bodyguard, or the Me Too activist is beating up women, normal people wouldn't be that hypocritical without hating them. Like, normal people couldn't do that. They'd be like, you know what, I'm going to pick another issue. I know I'm beating up women, so I'm not going to be like the Me Too spokesman. But liberals do that again and again. Why? What's that about?
I would contend that they don't believe in the issues. Any more than Barack Obama cared about your health care or getting rid of nuclear weapons or ISIS. These are mechanisms for their own power. They use them. And on the left, you get protected because you've already convinced everyone else that you're not the enemy. So I don't believe it's hypocrisy, because to be a hypocrite, I suppose you have to kind of sort of believe in the issue and then do the opposite. They don't really believe in it. And this is our problem, and that's the liberal problem now, is that has this just been a game? Does no one believe in the issues? And for the women that have believed in it, let this at least hopefully maybe be a crack. You want a broken glass ceiling? It is only happening because Hillary Clinton lost, and now there's a chance for liberals to be honest. And maybe it's the Kanye West theory. Maybe they can have freer minds, which will lead to safer lives and genuine independence, which is what liberals and conservatives, all Americans, genuinely want together. We can stop alienating ourselves from each other and come together for the things that we have in common.
I've said it before, you're a very deep person. Tammy, thank you for that.
Thank you, Tucker.
Great.
I appreciate it.
Well, former President Barack Obama had this to say about President Trump's decision to pull the U.S. out of the Iran deal. Quote, leaving the agreement could embolden an already dangerous regime, threaten our friends with destruction, pose unacceptable dangers to America's own security, and trigger an arms race in the world's most dangerous region. Let's get reaction from Republican Congressman and veteran from Florida, Brian Mast, who is on the House Foreign Relations Committee, among other things. Good to have you with us tonight.
Always good to be back.
What do you make of what President Obama had to say? He laid out some specific worries that he has about withdrawing from this deal.
I think they were just flat out wrong. I mean, you look at the last 8 years, the previous administration, it's like they suffered from some Chamberlain syndrome where if they could ignore or appease our enemies enough, that somehow our enemies would disappear or go away. And that's simply not the truth. And after that, they were emboldened. You saw the Iranian Revolutionary Guard being on the banks of Israel there. You've seen what they've done in Yemen with attacking our Navy vessels, with taking our sailors hostage. You've seen the things that have gone on since then. They've become more emboldened.
What do you make of this? Because I know that you, in your time in the Army, among other things, you're a bomb tech, but you also were trained with regard to nuclear weaponry.
That's right.
So what do you make of what the Obama administration says and what former Secretary of State John Kerry's been out saying, this put guardrails on them, this stopped them from moving forward, and taking away the deal takes away those protections.
That's not the reality of the situation. They needed three things to develop a nuclear weapon. They needed the material to do it. They needed a delivery system, an ICBM or whatever delivery system to deliver to wherever they wanted, and they needed the money to do it. People should ask themselves, why is it that this is technology that the United States of America was able to develop in the 1940s, the delivery systems by the 50s and 60s, and Iran still hasn't developed it to this day? They haven't had the materials that they needed. They haven't had the technology that they've needed. They haven't had the money that they needed to go out there and develop these systems. We loosened the restrictions on them to develop those delivery systems, those ballistic missile systems. We allowed them access to the world stage in terms of being able to go out there and sell their oil on the world stage. We've allowed them to colonize the Middle East and exploit the resources throughout the region. We're giving them all the tools that they need. And now the last piece that we've given to them was all they have to do is wait out enough time, and they're going to have all the fissile material they need to go out there and put it on the end of a warhead.
Well, and today, reaction from Iranian President Rouhani saying this. He's quoted as saying this on state television there, saying that he had ordered Iran's Atomic Energy Organization to prepare for unlimited uranium enrichment in the event that the government decides to withdraw from the pact. Because they say, listen, the Europeans are still part of this. We have other countries. We're not leaving the pact. But if we decide to, we're ready to fire this stuff right back up.
Well, that's what we've known from the very beginning. That's what all the information that Prime Minister Netanyahu put out there, that the Iranians were cheating from the very beginning. They weren't an honest broker when they were negotiating this with Kerry. They weren't upfront about what their true intentions were with the nuclear program. That's everything that was put out there in that information that President Trump was referencing. So we know they're ready to fire this program up, and they were ready to cheat on the program while they weren't letting IAEA inspectors into their facilities that were on military bases. That we know that's where they were probably going to be developing these systems.
You know, many of our European allies have urged the president to stay as a part of this deal, try to better it from being still engaged with it. Emmanuel Macron's tweet today says France, Germany, and the UK regret the U.S. decision to leave the JCPOA, this agreement. The nuclear non-proliferation regime is at stake. What does this do for our relationship with our allies now?
It makes it a little bit more tenuous. I don't think that anybody should deny that, but we have to be able to come to a realization that you don't make peace with your enemies. You negotiate peace with former enemies, and Iran is not any kind of former enemy. We shouldn't have been making that kind of negotiation with a nation that's willing to go out there and attack our service members on the battlefield. They were the ones that were out there and placing improvised explosive devices, lacing them with nuts and screws and bolts so that they could put holes in U.S. service members. They were the ones that were out there giving the technology to the Iraqis on explosively formed projectiles and weaponry that could rip through our up-armor Humvees. They are the ones that were out there being the aggressors. They were not a former enemy, and we shouldn't have been trying to negotiate with them.
Well, you know firsthand, and we thank you for your service in the Army, and now on Capitol Hill as well. Great to see you again tonight,
Congressman. Good to see you, too.
This is a Fox News alert. The attorney for an adult film performer trying to get out of a non-disclosure agreement over an alleged one-night stand with the president in 2006 is claiming he's found records of financial transactions between a Russian oligarch and Mr. Trump's personal attorney. So where did he get the documents? What do they really mean if they're legit? Well, Trace Gallagher's on the case tonight. Good evening, Trace.
Good evening, Shannon. Michael Avenatti, who is Stormy Daniels' attorney, has made several new allegations. Some have been partially confirmed. Others remain speculation because Avenatti won't offer up his sources. The big one is that Avenatti says 3 months after Michael Cohen paid porn star Stormy Daniels $130,000 to stay quiet about an alleged affair with Donald Trump, Russian oligarch Viktor Vekselberg paid $500,000 to Essential Consultants. That's Michael Cohen's company. Avenatti also says the $500,000 might have been used to reimburse Cohen for the $130,000 he paid Stormy Daniels. But the $500,000 actually came from an American company called Columbus Nova. It's true their biggest client is a company controlled by Viktor Vekselberg, but Columbus Nova says, quoting, after the inauguration, the firm hired Michael Cohen as a business consultant regarding potential sources of capital and potential investments in real estate and and other ventures. Reports today that Victor Vekselberg used Columbus Nova as a conduit for payments to Michael Cohen are false. Neither Victor Vekselberg nor anyone else outside of Columbus Nova was involved in the decision to hire Cohen or provided funding for his engagement. Yet tonight on CNN, Avenatti said family ties are at the heart of the connection between Columbus Nova and Vekselberg. Watch.
You have the CEO, Mr. Intratar, who's the cousin of the Russian oligarch, who is also Russian, obviously, Mr. Intratar is. And look, what's the explanation for the $500,000 worth of payments?
The New York Times says a few months ago, Victor Vekselberg was stopped at a New York area airport by agents working for Robert Mueller. Vekselberg reportedly had his electronic devices searched and was interviewed about the payments to Michael Cohen. And yet, while Cohen is under criminal investigation by federal prosecutors in New York, Victor Vekselberg isn't facing charges, nor is he a suspect. But Vekselberg was among the rich Russian businessmen sanctioned by the Trump administration. Attorney Robert Barnes thinks Avenatti getting illegal information and that he's connecting the dots that don't exist. Watch.
So he's trying to connect through 6 degrees of separation, something that simply is not connected, to create the innuendo and impression of a scandal that just doesn't exist, except for his own course of conduct in this case.
We should note the medical company, the pharmaceutical company Novartis, reportedly gave Cohen $400,000, and AT&T confirms it also paid Michael Cohen $200,000 to learn more about how the administration plans to operate. Shannon.
All right, Trace Gallagher live in L.A. Thank you very much.
Just a few hours after the New Yorker broke its story charging New York Democratic Attorney General Eric Schneiderman with abusing 4 women, he resigned his office. Now, isn't it rich that he set himself up as the hero of the Me Too movement by using his office to sue Harvey Weinstein?
Women were coerced into facilitating Harvey Weinstein's misconduct. Sometimes they were targets themselves. If they refused, they were threatened. They knew how pervasive it was, and not only did they fail to stop it, they enabled it and covered it up. We have never seen anything as despicable as what we've seen here.
Well, guess it takes one to know one. Well, Schneiderman was also the darling of the anti-Trump media and fellow Dems for challenging Donald Trump's nearly every move. He's filed over 100 lawsuits or administrative actions against the president, trying to stop his DACA plan, the travel ban, healthcare deregulation. It went on and on. Schneiderman quickly became a champion of the left resistance, a kind of superhero, which was how comedian and fangirl Samantha Bee attempted to frame him on this now scrubbed episode of her show.
Oh my God, he's
Schneiderman does whatever a Schneider can. Only he can save us all.
You're going to save us.
We're going to do it, but that requires a lot of people other than state attorneys general getting engaged.
Depends on what getting engaged means. Well, next time, Samantha, be careful. Oh, that's so bad. Do we really write that? Next time, do a better job choosing your superheroes. Now, although I gotta say, he did like to dress up, apparently, so maybe the superhero thing does work. Well, Schneiderman tried to explain away the charges against him this way. He said, in the privacy of intimate relationships, I have engaged in role-playing and other consensual sexual activity. I have not assaulted anyone. Superman didn't beat the hell out of Lois Lane, Eric. 4 women romantically involved with New York's top cop allege that Schneiderman abused them, including claims that he smacked, spit on, choked, and sexually and racially demeaned his victims. What a guy. He threatened to tap their phones or have someone follow or even kill them if they attempted to leave the relationship. As New York's highest-ranking law enforcement official, this is the guy who attended the Women's March, along, by the way, with Harvey Weinstein. And he would later use his prosecutorial authority against Weinstein and fought to get his victims greater compensation. So it was, yay, Eric, thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, as his profile rose as a leading defender of women in the wake of the Me Too movement, his victims were persuaded somehow to come forward. But they met their own resistance from the left.
In those conversations after the fact, a lot of their friends and loved ones said, don't do it, don't speak out against him. And in some cases, that was because they feared the risk of reprisals. But also in some cases, Allison, those friends warned them off of talking because they thought that he had the power to do too much good for the Democratic Party.
Wow. In other words, so long as Schneiderman was willing to use his office to block the Trump agenda and was working to tear down Trump, keep your tales of abuse quiet, ladies. Take one for the team. What's a little collateral damage, right? You know, it reminds me of how Harvey skated for so many years. Sure, he had money and he had power to make or break a career, but he also had the right political views. He had the coolest friends and all those politicians he raised millions for. Valuable commodity. But back to Schneiderman. Most of them knew or should have known about his history. A lot of the Democrats, people who were championing him, and a lot of the allegation against him. But they kept on their blinders. Again, how convenient. If this were a Republican, he would be decried on every cable show with barely a break for breaking news on the Iran deal. But instead of going after Schneiderman for his misdeeds and his abuse of office, today's Never Trump media merely use the scandal as just another vehicle for trashing conservatives.
Democrats have been trying to be very consistent when members of their own have been called out to draw a contrast. But there is not a lot of indication that this administration, unfortunately, likes to take the high road, particularly when it comes to political
They could have
brawls.
done both, is all I'm saying. This was a layup. But you could take him down by lifting women up in the defense of their rights.
And yet I don't think the lift up is a move they've got a lot of muscle memory on right now.
What a bizarre world we live in, that Donald Trump is accused of sexually harassing dozens of women and admits that he sexually assaults women on tape. And yet people like Mike Pence talk about what a great Christian he is.
One of the president's biggest foes, New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman, resigns over sexual abuse allegations. Is this a tipping point for Trump?
What? Wait a second. Is this a tipping point for Trump? How about, is this a tipping point for the left and the people who claim to be protecting America's women? Or is slapping, choking, spitting, and making women of color call a man master now acceptable behavior? Well, until it's discovered. White House counselor Kellyanne Conway certainly reached her tipping point yesterday. She nailed Schneiderman's hypocrisy when she tweeted out, "Gotcha," above a Schneiderman tweet where he wrote, "No one is above the law, and I'll continue to remind President Trump and his administration of that every day." Well, instead of acknowledging Schneiderman's loathsome and perhaps even criminal behavior, Planned Parenthood Action, that's the political arm of the abortion giant, decided to go after, wait for it, Kellyanne. They tweeted out, "Kellyanne polls, delete your account." Oh, okay. Now, what all this tells us is what so many of us have thought really for a long time. The left, while claiming to be the true, honest champions of women, at many times, at many points, consider them to be disposable, especially when they become politically inconvenient. Eric Schneiderman was a stalwart political ally of the left, but he's out of the picture now. So move on, quickly move on. And is back to vilifying Trump and any woman who supports his agenda. Are any of you fed up with this rank hypocrisy? Me too. And that's the angle.